Hello, and welcome to the dark room, the place where the shadows come to life and the things that go bump in the night are all too real. Today I'll be your guide through the twisted and terrifying stories that we have in store for you. From spine-chilling urban legends to bone-chilling ghost stories, we'll explore the darkest corners of the human psyche and leave you trembling in fear. So, turn off the lights, grab a blanket, and get ready to enter the dark room. Nightmare in the Halls, a school hostel horror tale. It was a dark and stormy night when the students of the old school hostel settled into their beds. As the rain pelted against the windows, the wind howled through the halls, making the old building creak and groan, but they were used to it. They had been living in the hostel for months, and nothing scary had ever happened before. But tonight was different. As the students slept, a strange noise echoed through the halls. It was a soft, shuffling sound, like something was dragging itself along the ground. Some of the students stirred in their sleep, but they quickly dismissed the noise as just the wind. However, as the night wore on, the sound grew louder and more persistent. Soon, it was impossible to ignore. One by one, the students woke up, groggy and confused, wondering what was happening. As they got out of their beds and walked towards the source of the noise, they saw something that made their blood run cold. There was a figure in the hallway, crawling towards them, with long, spindly arms and legs that seemed to bend in unnatural ways. Its face was twisted in a grotesque expression of agony, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. The students froze in fear, unable to move as the creature got closer and closer. And then, with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged towards them, its sharp, jagged teeth glinting in the moonlight. The students screamed and scattered, running in every direction, but the creature was too fast. It chased after them, its claws scraping against the walls as it closed in. In the chaos, the students soon became separated, lost in the maze-like corridors of the hostel. They could hear each other's screams echoing through the halls, but they were powerless to help. And then, one by one, the students began to disappear. Their bodies were never found, and their screams were never heard again. Some said they had been dragged into the shadows by the creature, while others whispered that they had been taken to another world, a world beyond the hostel. In the end, only a handful of students survived that night. They huddled together in a corner of the hostel, their hearts pounding with fear as they waited for the creature to find them. But it never did. As the sun rose over the horizon, the hostel fell silent once more. The creature was gone, leaving behind only a trail of blood and a haunting memory of the nightmare in the halls. The survivors of that horrific night were never the same. They tried to go back to their normal lives, but the memory of what they had experienced stayed with them, haunting them at every turn. Some of them dropped out of school, unable to cope with the trauma. Others tried to pretend like nothing had happened, but the fear in their eyes betrayed them. Years went by, and the hostel became a legend, a place where no one dared to stay. People whispered stories of the creature that lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. But one day, a group of students decided to investigate the legend. They didn't believe the stories, and they wanted to prove to themselves that it was all just a myth. As they entered the old hostel, they felt a chill run down their spines. The air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. But as they explored the halls, they soon realized that they had made a grave mistake. The creature was still there, waiting for them. It started with the same shuffling sound, the same twisted expression, and then, with a sudden burst of speed, it lunged towards them, its sharp claws glinting in the dim light. The students tried to run, but it was too late. The creature was too fast, too strong. One by one, it took them down, dragging them into the darkness. In the end, there were no survivors. The hostel remained silent once more, the only sound the howling of the wind through the empty halls. And the legend of the nightmare in the halls continued to live on, a warning to those who dared to venture into the darkness. The authorities were alerted of the disappearances, but they found no trace of the students. The investigation led them to the old hostel, which had been abandoned for years. When they entered the building, they found it in a state of disrepair, as if it had been untouched for decades. But there was something else there, something that made their skin crawl. As they searched the building, they found strange markings on the walls and floors, symbols that they couldn't decipher. It was as if the hostel had been used for some kind of ritual, something dark and otherworldly. The authorities were never able to explain what had happened to the students. The case remained unsolved, and the legend of the hostel only grew stronger. Years went by, and the hostel fell into further disrepair. It became a place that no one dared to venture near, a place of darkness and terror. But then, one day, a group of teenagers decided to explore the hostel once again. They had heard the stories, and they wanted to see if they were true. As they walked through the halls, they felt a sense of unease. The air was thick with the same eerie silence that had haunted the students years before. And then, they heard it, the shuffling sound, the same twisted expression. They tried to run, but the creature was too fast, too strong. It took them down one by one, dragging them into the darkness. And as they disappeared into the shadows, the hostel came alive once more, a place of darkness and terror that would never be forgotten. Despite the warnings, a group of thrill-seekers decided to spend a night in the hostel. They believed the stories were nothing more than urban legends, and they were determined to prove it. As they settled into their sleeping bags, they joked and laughed, dismissing the idea that anything could harm them. But then, in the middle of the night, they were awakened by a sound. It was the same shuffling sound that the previous victims had heard, but this time it was louder, closer. As they sat up in their sleeping bags, they saw something moving in the darkness. It was a shadow, a shape that seemed to shift and change. The group of friends tried to run, but the creature was too fast. It chased them through the halls, its claws clicking on the floor as it closed in on them. As they stumbled and fell, the creature pounced, its sharp claws tearing at their flesh. The screams echoed through the halls, piercing the silence of the night. In the end, there were no survivors. The hostel remained silent once again, the only sound the rustling of the leaves outside. And the legend of the nightmare in the halls continued to live on, a warning to those who dared to venture into the darkness. The authorities were once again called to the scene, but as they entered the hostel, they were met with a terrifying sight. The walls and floors were covered in strange symbols, and the air was thick with an oppressive energy. It was clear that something supernatural was at work, something beyond their understanding. As they investigated further, they found a hidden chamber deep within the hostel. Inside, they discovered a book, bound in human skin, filled with ancient incantations and spells. It was then that they realized that the hostel had been built on an ancient burial ground, and that the creature that haunted its halls was the vengeful spirit of a long-dead shaman. The authorities tried to exorcise the spirit, but their efforts were in vain. The hostel remained cursed, a place of darkness and terror that would never be free of its haunting. Years went by, and the hostel fell into further disrepair, but the legend remained. People whispered of the nightmare in the halls, and warned others never to venture into the darkness. And as the hostel crumbled into ruin, the spirit of the shaman remained, a vengeful presence that would never rest until its anger had been satisfied. Despite the warnings and the danger, some brave or foolish souls still dared to enter the hostel, seeking to uncover its dark secrets. Some came seeking thrills and adventure, while others were driven by a desire for knowledge, determined to uncover the truth behind the hostel's curse. But none of them ever returned. Those who did manage to escape spoke of the creature that haunted the halls, a twisted, malformed thing that seemed to shift and change, its claws tearing at flesh and bone. They spoke of the strange symbols that covered the walls, and the eerie, oppressive energy that hung in the air. But most of all, they spoke of the sense of dread that overcame them, the feeling that they were being watched, hunted by something ancient and malevolent. In the end, the hostel became a place of legend, a place that few dared to speak of, let alone visit, and as the years passed, it faded from memory, a forgotten relic of a darker, more sinister time. But the curse of the hostel remained, a reminder of the terrible things that had happened there, and the horrors that still lurked in the darkness. And as long as the hostel remained standing, the nightmare in the halls would continue to haunt the dreams of those who dared to tread too close to its crumbling.